Luke chapter 22, we'll begin this morning with verse 8. It's been 2 weeks, of course, since this class met. Chapter 22 begins with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Passover is very close. We remember like 2 weeks ago that Judas, Satan entered the heart of Judas. Not that he forced his way in, but Judas had a human limitation like we all have today. Judas apparently was greedy. Judas apparently wanted money or, the things of this life. And of course, we all have that today. But we have to keep those things in perspective. We have to keep those things under control. And Judas, of course, was a human being. He didn't have that ability, maybe, or he didn't have that desire to keep that under control. It wasn't that the devil made him do it. He just had a human quality that we all had that he needed to curb and to keep under control, and he, of course, failed to do that. But verse 7 he's gone and he's made his deal with the chief priest and the scribes. They've agreed for 30 pieces of silver that Judas is going to betray this man Jesus, and he promised them in verse 6 that he's going to find some occasion, somewhere, somehow, that he's going to turn this man Jesus over to them. Verse 7, it tells us, then came the day of unleavened bread when the Passover must be killed. And so that's where we are at this particular point. Now notice verse 8. We'll read down through verse 13 for our discussion this morning. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare us the Passover that we may eat. And they said unto him, where wilt thou that we prepare it? He said unto them, behold, when you are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he enters in. And ye shall say unto the goodman of the house, the master saith unto thee, where is the guest chamber, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? And he shall show you a large upper room furnished, that they there make ready. And Peter and John went and found as he had said unto them, and they made ready the Passover. Now notice, if you would, as we go back to verse 8, Luke chapter 22, verse 8, Jesus here is going to send Peter and John. So he's going to send them to prepare the Passover feast. Matthew and Mark doesn't indicate who he sent. I think Matthew says some of the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, where are we going to observe the Passover feast? But Luke here tells us, or rather he names these two apostles, Peter and John, and Jesus here is going to tell them, you two need to go get things ready so that we can observe the Passover. Notice what he said there in verse 8, Luke chapter 22, go prepare us the Passover that we may eat. Remember in our study, our discussion over the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've discussed the idea that there was the Passover feast, and it was followed immediately by the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 7 days of unleavened bread. Passover was what would be on what we call a Friday. The Feast of Unleavened Bread began the next day, the very next day, on a Saturday or their Sabbath, and then there was to be 7 days of unleavened bread. But notice he says here, go prepare us the Passover meal that we can eat the Passover meal. What about the 7 days of unleavened bread? Was Jesus interested in that? Is Jesus going to be around to observe the 7 days of unleavened bread? Jesus is going to be betrayed, arrested, and he's going to be killed this same day. This is going to be Thursday for us. Remember, their days began at 6 o'clock in the evening. 6 o'clock in the evening on Thursday is going to begin the Passover, and it's going to go to 6 o'clock on Friday. From 6 Thursday evening to 6 Friday evening is going to be the Passover. Jesus is going to be betrayed and killed on Passover. He's going to observe the Passover feast. He's going to be arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's going to be brought before Caiaphas and Herod and Agrippa, King Agrippa, and back to Pilate, crucified and on the cross. And remember last week, or 2 weeks ago, we saw that they had to get him down off the cross because the day of preparation for the Sabbath, the first Sabbath of the 7 days of unleavened bread, were going fixed to happen. They only had a short window to get this dead man off the cross and get him buried, because it was against the old law to leave a dead person on the cross overnight, and especially on the Sabbath, and especially on this Sabbath. This is going to be a high holy Sabbath for them. This is going to be the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So Jesus here, he's not so much interested in the 7 days of the unleavened bread. He's going to eat the Passover, and that's going to be it for him. He's not going to be around for the 7 days of the unleavened bread. But notice what he tells them. Now, you go prepare us the Passover. What preparation would there have been? You know, when I read this over the years of my life, I got it in my head, well, they're going to find a room. We're going to go find a room so they could eat the Passover feast. Well, that's part of it. That was a small part of it. The big part of their job that day, they got to prepare this meal. What's on the menu for the Passover meal, sir?
Bread and wine.
Bread and wine. What else? Anything else?
Lamb.
A lamb? Sounds like a pretty good meal. I don't think I've ever eaten lamb. I don't think I've. You have? You ever eat lamb?
I don't remember seeing the word lamb on there.
On the Passover feast?
Yeah.
Remember the sacrificial lamb on the Passover feast? Exodus chapter 12. The lamb that was roasted on the open fire. You know, yeah, there's a lamb. A sacrificial lamb. You know, Jesus is going to, this sacrificial lamb is going to be the type of, or Jesus is going to be the antitype of the sacrificial physical lamb. He's going to be the Lamb of God, the Son of God. And at any rate, their job is to go prepare this meal. You know, this is Thursday. They got till 6 o'clock that evening to get all this stuff together. You know, it says, you know, then came the day of unleavened bread when the Passover must be killed. It's going to be killed that day, that evening. We'll see that in just a few minutes here. But they've got to get a lamb. They got to get some bitter herbs. They got to get some unleavened bread. All that's in Exodus chapter 12, verses 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere along in there. John and Peter were sent to make these preparations. And they, of course, knew what the Passover was. They know what it consisted of. You know, they knew that they needed whatever room that they found. They're going to have to sweep that room of all leaven. There could not be a speck of leaven in that room. They knew what they had to do. They knew what was in front of them. They'd practiced this all their lives, observed the Passover all their lives. They're going to have to kill a lamb and roast it. How long would it take to roast a lamb?
If it's any good, you'd have to cook it slow and low.
Yeah, we're going to look at Exodus chapter 12 in just a minute. I picture a lamb. He's still got his head and his feet on him now. We skipped the thing, I guess, Edgar. We've got him. This is not going to be a fine meal. This is not a fine meal. A dry lamb over an open fire, bitter herbs.
Well, they did it then.
Pardon me?
Does it say that it wasn't a good meal?
What do you want, a piece of dry lamb that's been turned on a spit or a rotisserie?
They probably knew how to do it.
They didn't saute him or anything. You know, they would. I don't think this was a luxurious. In fact, I know this ain't no luxurious meal now. But this is something that's going to be.
When they in the observance of, they had to leave quickly.
Yes.
They didn't have time to do all these things. You know, they were told to prepare, get your clothes ready, get ready to go. You know,
Exactly.
You got to leave extra. When
You
the
know.
Lord tells you to leave now.
If we're going to have a tasty lamb, you know, let's have some leavened bread too. Some big old yeast rolls. You know, that'd be better, wouldn't it? I mean,
Do you see the beauty of the fact that Jesus was observing the Passover, arrested, and on the Passover?
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I think it was God's providential care. His arrest day wasn't just by happenstance.
Oh no. The same day that this Passover lamb, after 6 o'clock in the evening, this lamb is going to be killed. Jesus is going to be arrested that same night.
The same day that it was killed was the day that Jesus.
Absolutely. Before 6 o'clock Friday evening for us, for our understanding. Because at 6 o'clock Friday evening began the Sabbath day. But now, you know, they got to get a lamb together they got to prepare the meal. Where are they going to get a lamb? Have they been herding the lamb? You know, this journey started back in Luke chapter 9, verse 51. Luke chapter 9, they headed to Jerusalem for the Passover. And where Jesus is going to be betrayed and crucified. Where did they get a lamb from? They've been herding a lamb?
They bought it at Walmart.
Walmart? Well, essentially that they did.
Basically, you ask the
They've
question.
been doing this for years, they probably were people who supplied that kind of thing.
Okay, where did the black market, the black market that's set up in the temple there?
They were selling.
They were selling lambs and doves, and they had money changers there. If you remember one class we discussed, and we will go to Deuteronomy chapter 14, but the Lord made provision for that. If y'all living a long way off and you're going to Jerusalem for the Passover, and it's too far for you to drive this lamb all the way to Jerusalem to herd a lamb, they're going to hook it up to their mule and put it in the cattle trailer. They're going to haul this thing. The Lord said, tell them whatever lamb they've got where they live, sell it. Take the money you get out of your lamb, take it to Jerusalem, buy a lamb. And that, of course, is where the black market was set up. I know these folks are coming every year to Jerusalem, and I got lots of lambs I can sell. So I've set me up a pen right there in the temple door. If y'all need a lamb, here I am. This is where I make my big living off of this festival cookie. I make money off of this thing, and of course that's what made Jesus angry, that they turned the temple into just a den of thieves. I'm charging double for my lamb, but you need one, huh? It's worth it. You got to have a lamb, so come over here and pay me for my lamb. Anyone have any comment? But now notice, verse 9. They're going to prepare this Passover meal so that you can eat. Peter and John said to them, well, okay, but where can we prepare it? Where can we make these preparations? Where can we do that? Did Jesus have a condo in Jerusalem? Just, go to Jesus' place. Where are they going to get a place to prepare? It's what Peter and John is asking him. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 20 tells us that Jesus didn't even have a place to lay his head. No place to lay his head. The creator of everything is hard of a shame that he didn't have a place to lay his head. He didn't have a place to observe the Passover feast. They're going to have to find a place. Y'all go to town and find a place, ain't you?
This is another example of where God takes care of things that we can't handle.
Yes.
The disciples did not know where. And Jesus basically says, God will take care of it. He'll send a man to you.
Yeah.
You go in faith, you go with duty, and God will take care of the rest of it.
Yeah. Took a lot of faith, huh? Took some faith. Here's what he said for us to do. Notice verse 10. Well, he told Peter and John, well, look, when you get to the city of Jerusalem, there's going to be a man that's going to meet you. He's going to be bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him to the house where he's going to. Go to the city of Jerusalem. He's going to give them some explicit directions here, some simple directions that maybe even somebody like me could follow. Remember, they're out on the Mount of Olives. Luke chapter 21 and verse 37 tells us that they're out on the Mount of Olives at night. In the daytime, they're in the temple at Jerusalem, but every night they go back to the Mount of Olives. Apparently, maybe it's daylight on the Mount of Olives. He told them, y'all need to go to Jerusalem and get the Passover feast for us, because today is the day we kill the lamb and we observe it tonight after dark. So where can we go? We'll go to the city of Jerusalem. When you get there, there's going to a man meet you. This man is going to meet them. He can be carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. Are we supposed to look for a man carrying a pitcher of water? This guy's probably a servant if he's out there carrying a pitcher of water. He's a servant. There's probably a lot of folks running around with a pitcher of water. Apparently there's going to be a specific person that's going to meet you, Peter and John. He'll be there. He can be placed there by the Lord. This is going to be by the providence of God. Has this situation ever happened before? Back up to Luke chapter 19. Remember when Jesus needed the donkey, the colt? Not you, colt, a real donkey. Luke chapter 19, verse 29, it came to pass that when Jesus was come nigh to Bethpage in Bethany at the mount called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples. Maybe it's Peter and John again. We don't know. But here he sent in two disciples, and in verse 30 he said, y'all go into the village that's right up ahead there now, And when you get there, you're going to find a colt tied where the never man said, loose him and bring him here. Any man ask you, why are you loosing the colt? Thus shalt you say to him, because the Lord hath need of him. Verse 32, and they that were sent went their way and found even as he said that to them. Jesus, he's got some kind of special power here. He told them when they're going to find the donkey, here's what's going to happen. He told Peter and John, when you get to Jerusalem, here's what's going to happen. They're going to man meet you with this pitcher of water. That should have increased their faith. Should have increased their faith. But, of course, Peter and John being human. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. But notice verse 11. Follow this man to wherever he's going with the pitcher of water. When you get there, say to the goodman of the house, notice this, the master says to you, the master is sending you a message, sir. Where's the guest chamber where I can eat the Passover with my disciples? Matthew chapter 26, verse 18 says say to the homeowner, look, my time is at hand. I need a place to eat the Passover. Did Jesus know this fellow? This fellow knows Jesus.
It's implied that he did.
It's implied that he did. When they got the donkey, they said, well, the master has need of the donkey. Well, okay, if he needs him, take him. And we've discussed before, Jesus' fame had spread everywhere. Everybody apparently knew about this man, Jesus. And maybe when they got to the homeowner's place here, the goodman of the house, he's told him, the master has sent you a message. Apparently he knew who the master was. Apparently he knew who they were talking about when this man Jesus tells him, my time is at hand. I need a place to observe the Passover feast. But notice that they didn't ask if there was a room. They didn't ask, can we use the room? They asked, where's the guest chamber? Apparently Jesus knew this man. Apparently Jesus knew that there would be a spare room in this man's house. The history tells us that, there's a lot of people that have come to Jerusalem during Passover. Jerusalem just jam-packed with people. Everybody needs a room. This is the day of Passover. It's 6 minutes after 10 here this morning. At 6 o'clock this evening, Passover starts at 6 o'clock. So we've got a little less than 8 hours. Peter and John have a little less than 8 hours to find this room, kill the lamb, roast the lamb. Well, they're going to do that after 6 o'clock this evening. But they got a lot to do in 8 hours here. Jesus knew that this fella had a spare room. All these people in Jerusalem looking for a spare room. This is the day of the Passover. This fella still got a spare room. History tells us that the Jews of Jerusalem during this time, if they were permanent citizens of Jerusalem, when all these people come in, they would open their house to these folks. And they would loan them a spare room. They'd loan them ever how many spare rooms they had. At other times, they would rent out their room. But during Passover, they loaned out their spare rooms. This is the day of Passover. And it's getting to be a little bit late. Jesus, maybe we should have thought of this 2 days ago. We probably ain't going to find a room in Jerusalem. They're all taken up. We should have thought of this 2 days ago. But Jesus said, you'll follow the man with the pitcher. Tell the man, the homeowner, when you get there, we need to borrow your room. He knew the man. He knew that the man still had a spare room. Anyone have any comment? Notice verse 12. He's going to show you a large upper room furnished. Right there. He's going to show you the room. No questions asked. He's going to show you a furnished, large upper room. They were told to ask about the guest room. Probably was a smaller space, but this householder, he's going to offer a completely furnished, large upper room. Did that include the meal? It's furnished. Furnished. We got everything ready. Just come on in. Of course, that doesn't include the meal. Go with me to Exodus chapter 12. Now, we're going to spend just off and on back in Exodus chapter 12 so we can understand now what's going on here and the time constraints that we have here. You know, we waited until the last minute. That's typical of me, typical of us. But Jesus is not, of course, concerned about it. He knows what's going to happen. Exodus chapter 12, verse 6. Notice when this lamb's going to be killed. Was the lamb already killed there waiting in the Lord's upper room? No. Verse 6. This is talking about the lamb. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. This is the 14th day of the first month. That's when the Passover is going to begin, 6 o'clock in the evening. The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lamb, or whatever lamb that evening. They found the place, the large upper room that's furnished, but the meal ain't there. You know, the table's there, whatever else is there. But the meal's not there because the lamb's not going to be killed until Passover begins at 6 o'clock in the evening. But so they still got to they found a room now, but now they got to get the meal together. Notice verse 13 now. And they went and found as he had said unto them, and they're going to make ready the Passover. They found the room just like Jesus said it would be, just like it was in Luke chapter 19. You would think that would strengthen their faith. Peter and John, whoever went to find the donkey, it was he was right there tied. Just when we got in town, there's the donkey, there's the colt. Do we understand that these two, Peter and John, along with the other 10 or 9, if we don't want to count Judas, tonight, Peter and John and the rest of them are going to run off and leave this man Jesus. I mean, tonight. When Passover begins at 6 o'clock this evening, we've got this lamb cooked, and we've eaten the Passover feast, and we went back out to the Mount of Olives, and he's arrested by them Roman soldiers. Edgar, I don't know who he is. I just happened to stumble on this group. I'm not part of this group, Andy. These folks are going to run off and leave him in just a few hours. Peter and John, they're going to make ready the Passover. They're going to need this sacrificial lamb. If you're still in Exodus, back up to Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. Notice something about this. Exodus chapter 12, and verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. Now, they're still in Egypt. Moses has not yet led these people out of Egyptian captivity. Notice what he tells them. Now, verse 2, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. Maybe this month is different from what that used to be, the first day of the first month of the year. But this month, Jesus is telling Moses and Aaron, this month, this is April. Moses and Aaron, beginning right now, April the 1st is going to be New Year's Day. And history tells us that this is about March or April. But he's telling them now, this month is going to be the beginning of months. It's going to be the first month of the year to you from now on. And Exodus 13 and verse 4 tells us the name of the month was Abib, A-B-I-B, or something like that. Later, for some reason, when they were in Babylonian captivity, it was changed to Nisan, N-I-S-A-N, something like that. But beginning right now, this is going to be your first the first day of the month. Now notice, verse 3, speaking to the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, April the 10th, shall everybody take to them, every man, every family, every household, a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for each house. Notice verse 5. Your lamb that each of y'all's families is going to take is going to be a lamb without any blemish, a male of the first year. He shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. On the 10th of April, go out to your sheep herd, pick out a lamb that doesn't have any blemish. He's to be about a year old. Pin that lamb up on the 10th of April. Put him in a pen. Feed him out like we used to do, Edgar. Hog that you got out of the woods and he's full of acres, you need to clean him out with some corn and stuff like that. Well, that's what we're going to do with this sheep. Fatten him up a little bit. Notice verse 6, we pinned up this lamb on the 10th of April. keep him pinned up until the 14th day of the same month. From the 10th of April until the 14th of April, feed him up in his pen, and on the 14th day of the same month, the whole of the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill that lamb in the evening. In the evening, when the 14th day starts, kill the lamb. After 6 o'clock in the evening, kill the lamb. That of course is the Passover lamb. We were going to John chapter 12, and we won't, but John chapter 12 and verse 1 tells us that 6 days before Passover, Jesus arrived at Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house, out at Bethany on the Mount of Olives. The next day, the 5th day, Jesus begins his trip towards Jerusalem. That would be the day that they're going to pin up this lamb, the 10th day of the month. Jesus is going to enter Jerusalem on the day that everybody's pinning up their lamb. 4 days later, the lamb's going to be killed, and Jesus is going to be crucified. Was that by design? Again, we're going to talk about the type and antitype here in just a few minutes. Jesus was a sacrificial Lamb of God. He died on the same day that this physical lamb was killed as they would observe the Passover feast. Anyone have any comment? Now let's go back to Luke chapter 22. Notice now verse 14. We're going to have to read a little further now. Luke chapter 22, verse 14. Down through 16. When the hour was come, Jesus sat down, and the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, Folks, with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I want to tell you something, I will not any more eat thereof until it be fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Now notice when the hour has come, the hour, the time that they're going to eat this Passover meal. Peter and John have got everything together. They've got everything put in this large upper room. They've had the lamb killed at evening that evening on the 14th of that month. Jesus and the other apostles have made their way to this man's place, this large upper room. If you're still in Exodus chapter 12, now go back there with me now for just a minute. Verse 6, you're going to kill it on the 14th day of the same month in the evening. Notice verse 7, that you shall take of the blood and strike on the 2 side posts of the upper door. That's a side question, and I don't know the answer. Probably shouldn't even ask it. Do they still do that? They still smearing the lamb, the blood of the lamb outside. Did Jesus and his group smear the blood of the lamb outside the door? Or was that just for the first Passover? I don't know. Edgar?
I don't know really about that, but I'm down at verse 14. It says, And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, and keep it a feast by the ordinance forever.
Mm-hmm. So maybe they did. But I thought about it, and I sort of looked for it. That's the only reference to it in Exodus chapter 12 there, where they actually smeared the blood around the door facing on the outside of the door. Maybe they still did. But I don't know, and my mind's sometimes almost as strange as Angie's, not quite, but I just thought about that. And I don't have the answer to that of course, but anyway. Notice verse 8, Exodus chapter 12, we smeared the blood around. Verse 8, eat the flesh in that night. The flesh of that lamb is to be roasted with fire. Eat it with unleavened bread. Eat it with bitter herbs. They shall eat it, bitter herbs. We can't saute. Is that the name of that? Saute, or what do you do sometimes to meat? Saute or something? Marinate. That's it. Marinate. We can't marinate the lamb. I got to eat this dry lamb now with bitter herbs. We've got him, with a stick run through him maybe over this open fire. Then we got a rotisserie. Right? Notice the next verse. This is not a luxurious meal now. Don't eat it raw. Don't boil it in water. Roast it with fire. With his head and with his legs and with the is entrails also.
No, that's not a good meal.
No, no.
I didn't realize they didn't clean him out.
Oh, no. We're in a hurry. We ain't got time to, have a big lavish meal. Skin the thing. Don't bother with his head or his feet or anything. And get him on the pole, get him over the roasted fire, roast him. Notice verse 10. And you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And whatever is remaining of it until the morning, burn it on that fire. I guess the guts were left, and his head and his feet. If there was too big of a lamb for them all to eat, there's something of the lamb left over. But anyway, whatever was left over at daylight, burn it on that fire. Eat what you can, but if you can't eat it all, burn it on the fire. That's the reason I said a couple of weeks ago, John chapter 19, when the scribes and the chief priests took Jesus to Pilate's hall, and it was early in the morning, they wouldn't go in. They didn't want to be defiled because they had not yet eaten the Passover. I think they're talking about the whole feast there. If they hadn't eaten the Passover at daylight by then, Jesus had, everybody else had, it was too late to eat the Passover, Linda.
Did the Jews today keep the Passover?
They claim to, some of them. I'm sure it's not like this. I don't know. Yeah, they claim to. In fact, I heard on the news here a day or two ago, this is Passover now. I don't know how to come up with that. This is Passover? Or maybe this is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I don't know.
I'm sure it's been changed down through the
Oh, drastically. Drastically. Notice verse 11. Just to get back to Luke chapter 22. Verse 11. Here's how you're going to eat it. Not with knives or forks, but their dress and their posture, I think. Eat with your loins girded. They walked around in flowing robes. And when we're going to get out and travel or walk a lot, they put this sash or belt or whatever it is around it. They picked up the flowing robe a little bit so it would be easier to walk with. But when you get home, loosen the sash or the girder, whatever it is. But when you get ready to eat this meal, gird your loins, have your shoes on your feet, have your staff in your hand. Eat this luxurious meal in haste. What do you mean a luxurious meal? Eat it in haste. Why are they doing all that? When we get through eating here, we fix to walk out the door and we're all leaving. So be prepared to eat. Now, but notice now as we go back to Luke chapter 22, verse 14. Let me find it here. Jesus, and when the hour was come, Jesus sat down, and the 12 apostles sat down with him. Now, Exodus chapter 12 and verse 11 has always indicated to me that they were standing up eating. It doesn't say that. They're fully clothed, they've got their shoes on, they've got their staff in their hand, they're ready to walk out the door. Eat this in haste. Ain't got time to sit down, you ain't got time to lounge around. But it doesn't say that they were standing up. But what I noticed here, and again, I'm sort of strange, Jesus has sat down to eat this feast. Is that a departure from an example? Or, but again, it doesn't say that they were standing up. But Jesus has sat down to eat this meal. John chapter 13 tells us that John the Apostle was leaning against Jesus as they're eating. They're propped up eating a meal. They're not necessarily, I don't guess, eating it in haste. What's the difference? I think they still ate it the way they're supposed to eat it. Whatever left over till the morning, they're going to burn it, but they're going to serve the Passover. But they're sitting down. John's reclining. Not a big hurry. We got all night till daylight. So some folks suppose that this symbolizes the rest that they had now. That they made it to the promised land, to the land of Canaan. The first Passover was eaten in haste because we need to get this ate and then we're out the door. Now that they can rest as they observe this Passover, they've entered into the promised land, and so they can rest and relax because God has provided for them though now, but they still observe the Passover to be reminded, they can be reminded of what the Lord has done for them with that first Passover. Anyone have any comment? Or whatever any of that's worth. But Jesus has sat down with the 12. The 12, now Judas is there. Now, Judas has already made his plans with the high priest to betray this man. He's got his 30 pieces of silver. Possibly he's got it in his pocket sitting there with Jesus at this table. Judas sits there at the table with the person that he is very soon, within just a few hours, he's sitting at the table with the person he's going to betray. Notice verse 15. Judas is sitting there. He said unto them, Judas and the rest of the 11, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say unto you, I will not any more eat of this Passover until it be fulfilled. This Passover is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. With desire, I have very much looked forward to eating this Passover with all of you, even Judas.
Go back to Matthew's account.
Okay.
Matthew's account a little bit more detail while they were eating. He tells them who's going to betray him.
Yeah.
Luke didn't record the entire conversation.
Right. Go ahead. Matthew 26.
Matthew 26.
Where are we at?
Verse 20.
20. You want to read it for us?
When evening had come, he sat down with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, Surely I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they said, and each one began to say, Lord, is it I? And he answered, He who dipped his hand within the dish will betray me. And, he had a more in-depth conversation with his mother than,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Judas was there, and Judas knew what was,
Yeah. Judas was there, but notice what Jesus is saying to all of them, and including Jesus. Judas, I very much look forward to this, and I don't think he's talking about necessarily eating this meal.
He's looking for in the context, he says, I won't eat until the kingdom of God has come.
Right.
These disciples, they've been asking on multiple occasions, when is the kingdom coming? When are we going to be restored? They were looking for the kingdom. Jesus now tells them, I'm not going to eat the kingdom. It's the kingdom is coming.
Yes.
That's the important part.
That's the important part. No.
Passover's not what was important. The kingdom of God.
Right. No, he's not talking about just, I'm so thrilled to sit down. All 12 of us are here together now to eat this meal. This ain't a good meal. I don't think I'd want no dried out lamb. But that's what they were having anyway, and that's what they were supposed to have. Pardon me?
You're just too hard to cook for.
Well, you want to... We'll borrow a lamb from Milton and Shane, and we'll see how long it takes to cook it on an open fire, and we'll let some of y'all eat it. I don't think I want none, Edgar. The thing's going to be dried out, Maybe it's not as bad as I think, but anyway. But he's looking forward to this, being together with all of them, including Judas. Eat it with all of you, but notice what he says, before I suffer. Verse 15. Before I suffer. Now Judas is sitting there. Do you think that bothered Judas?
Well, Jesus identified him. In Matthew's account, they asked, who is it?
Yeah.
And Judas says, Rabbi, is it I? And Jesus said, you have said it.
Yeah.
He was a little bit two-faced.
Yeah. But he's sitting there, and I'm listening to this guy. Let's put ourselves in the place of Judas. I'm going to be sitting at the table. I'm going to be Judas. You be Judas. He's telling me now, I've already got paid. I want to betray you, but I'm so glad to be sitting here with you. Really? Linda?
I think Judas, for that time, he had hardened his heart so.
Yes.
Until he could do anything.
Yes. Yes.
Because he did it.
Because he did it. Yeah, he did. He did it. Yeah. But he's telling me I'm still sitting there. I've been looking forward to this before I suffer. Well, wouldn't that bother me just a little?
Not here, Judas.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, you know, greatly looking forward to this Passover, but before this last Passover. Notice verse 16. I'm not going to eat this anymore. This is my last time to eat the Passover. Shouldn't that bother Judas? And Judas had at least probably observed 2 or 3 Passovers with this guy. They're all Jewish. They observed the Passover, have been for the last all their lives. They've done it with Jesus. Now this is probably maybe about the 3rd time. This is the last time I'll ever eat this with y'all. And I'm Judas, and I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, shouldn't I feel a little bit bad about that, or didn't bother him at all? You know.
Satan was inside of him.
Satan had entered him. That's for sure.
He was controlling.
Yeah. Jesus is ready to offer himself as a sacrifice. He's going to suffer and die. He's going to offer his blood as a sacrifice for the sins of the whole world. He's looking forward to this occasion, looking forward to his death for our benefit and for our salvation. Now, I'm in Judas's place today. He's going to offer his death. He's going to shed his blood for my benefit and for my salvation. How much does that affect me today? Jesus has offered his blood. He's died for me. Now I'm sitting at the table with Jesus. Should that bother me? Should that affect me somehow? More than maybe it does. Do I appreciate what Jesus has done? Do I appreciate it in the way that I actually should? Am I humanly capable?
I don't think they understood anything.
Yeah, but we ain't talking about them. We're talking about us today now.
Oh,
We're talking about us today. Judas is sitting at the table. When does it bother Judas? I don't think Judas is bothered. We're past time, but I need to make this point.
Judas wasn't bothered after it was all over.
Yeah. Judas is sitting there at the table passively. Before I suffer, I'm so glad to be eating with all of y'all. Well, I'm Judas, and you just don't know what's coming, old big guy. Ain't bothering him. Notice Matthew, I'm trying to find it, Matthew 26. Where did he take the money back? Okay, Matthew 27. Verse 3. Notice when Judas was bothered. The Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, well, he changed his mind and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. And Jesus said, look, I've sinned. I betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, well, what's that to us? You take care of that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple. He left and he went out and hanged himself. The only time that Judas realized, he's sitting at the table hearing all this, he didn't bother about that. Not until he realized it was what's actually going to happen, and it was too late. That's when he figured out maybe he ought to have a different attitude. Is that me today? Is that me?
Chase Rabbit, what you say.
Okay.
Judas, he says in that context, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood.
Yes.
Was he forgiven?
At that time, maybe. He went out and hanged himself, and we always say, well, that's we can't do that. Of course, we can't. He said that he repented. King James said he repented. But then he went out and hung himself. So, we're going to let the Lord take care of that. Not next week. I was supposed to say, you're supposed to remind me. Andy, I'm sorry, Pat and I are going to have to be gone next Sunday. I don't think I've announced our Luke, Paula and David's son is getting married. Luke's going to get married. And next Sunday is the wedding shower after church next Sunday up there in Tyler or Glendale. So we got to go to the shower, Burnell. Anyway, well, I know it. And pray for Luke and for Destiny. They're going to get married towards the end of May. Pray for me also because they've asked me to marry them. And I'm more in the marrying business. I'm in the funeral business, but somehow or another I get those things. But at any rate, We won't be here next Sunday, and I'm sorry for that. I missed 2 Sundays already. Burnell?
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple comments.
Okay?
Judas kept a very close secret there between him and Jesus and the apostles.
Yes, he did.
Nobody knew anything what he was doing. He was only man that really knew what was going on was the scribes and Pharisees at that time.
Right.
And of course, everything was carried out according to Judas' plan, meeting with them and the money and so forth. So that part was a top secret that he kept to himself for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't know if we discussed the word the upper room.
Okay?
I've got an opinion of this.
Okay?
They met in an upper room, this is my opinion, because if they had down on the street level, there was goats bleating, the horses, mules hollering, and
Yeah.
children playing.
Okay.
They moved up where they could not hear all this stuff, it kind of cut out a lot of the noise.
Okay. That very well could be.
I found this obvious in Acts 10th chapter. When Peter went up on the housetop, it wasn't the upper room, but it was on the housetop. He went up there to pray where he could concentrate on what he was going to say to the Lord.
Right?
And talk with the Lord there. He was down in the room with a lot of people drinking coffee and eating cake. He couldn't concentrate too well on that. So he went up to the upper room. Upper room.
Right. Right.
Then in Acts the 20th chapter, it says that Paul and them met in the upper room
Yes.
because it had to be an upper room there because Eutychus fell out the window and probably revived him, brought him back to life.
Right.
So they went up there to get away from the noise of the people
Like
down
a baby.
below, the children screaming and everything, and
Yeah.
things going on that would take the meaning away from the Lord's Supper. What if we had, just say, next door we had a motorcycle shop, and you know how people buy motorcycles, you rip them up.
Yeah.
Could you concentrate much on the Lord's Supper?
No.
No.
No. Not very well.
So that's why we meet here at a quiet place and have the Lord's Supper
Right.
on Sunday morning. It's quiet here, and we can take it and concentrate on the supper and everything. So that's a blessing that we can do that without noise.
Right. That's one thing I was going to point out too. When Peter and John were sent to find this place, they were the only one that's going to know where it is. Judas ain't going to know where it is till he gets there. You know, he's going to have to wait till the Passover's over, and then he's going to leave before the rest of them and go get everybody else, because they're headed for the Mount of Olives. He knows where they're going that night. So that night, he's going to be betrayed right after he eats the Passover meal with this man Jesus. Next week or 2 weeks from today, Luke chapter 22, verse, what was that, 14 or 15, somewhere along in there. Now, Andy, I'm sorry, really, we didn't plan the wedding shower. We were just invited. But anyway, thank you for your help this morning. I've enjoyed this life.